in the groups there. So yeah, enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ollie. Oh. Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Yes.
Great. So I'm going to hand over to Pete West, first of all, who is from Energy Local in Bridport, and who's got a case study to share with us, though I think it's a case study from before 2015, isn't it?
No.
Oh, it's not?
No,
okay,
it's very
great. Well,
recent.
let me hand over to Pete.
Okay, I'll see if I can share the screen, okay? Let's have a look. Okay. Yeah, I'll just go back a little bit.
That looks great, Pete, by the way.
Yeah, hang on then. I just need to go back to the first, from the beginning. I'm just, now then, I'm not quite sure why these slides aren't moving. Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Finally there. Right, so yes, it's really a case study of local supply of wind energy to householders using the existing grid, which Energy Local Bridport has now been managing relatively successfully for 2 years. But it's in partnership with Octopus Energy, who've been doing the metering, the billing, and also with the national organisation, Energy Local Community Interest Company, who've basically provided us with training and set up the contracts with Octopus Energy. But maybe to start with my own background, I was Renewable Energy Development Officer with Dorset County Council for 8 years before I retired. And also I was been a director of Dorset Community Energy since 2013. And basically, Dorset Community Energy was originally, like many community energy groups, installing solar PV on schools and community buildings. And again, it's still operating now. It's gone through a few challenges with the end of the feed-in tariff, but basically Dorset Community Energy raised £1.5 million to install solar PV on 25 sites, schools, hospitals, community buildings. And perhaps a little bit different from Sussex. We're the actually only community energy group in the county. And basically, I think it's just because there's so much admin involved that people say, well, look, if you can do it, you just do it. So that's the way it's evolved. But then 2018, I was at a meeting and spoke to Mary Gilly, who'd basically started up Energy Local a year or two before in Bethesda in North Wales, and they won the Ashton Award in 2018. The project in Bethesda was supplying electricity from a hydro through the grid to 100 residents in the town. It's a National Trust-owned hydro. And that was in partnership with Cooperative Energy. Cooperative Energy was taken over by Octopus Energy. And so then when we started, Mary said, okay, you can give it a go in Bridport as well. When we started in January 2020, that was with Octopus Energy, and they were really just in the process of taking over and developing their own software to enable this local trading. So what we thought is our existing business model was fine, supplying a building, but what really would be a step forward would be to supply individual householders who themselves didn't actually have enough capital to put, say, solar panels on their home, or they didn't have a suitable roof, or in this particular case, anybody with solar panels also buying wind energy, as I'll show you a bit later, can be virtually almost completely renewable. Wind and solar together, a pretty good mix. So anyway, we with support from Energy Local National, we launched Energy Local Bridport in January 2020. We had 2 street stalls like this in a public meeting. We needed 50 householders to be supplied from this. It's only a 50 kilowatt wind turbine, which is already generating. And we had 90 people sign up in the first month. And even now we've got a waiting list of 90 or 100 people in addition to the 50 that's joined. That's without any publicity at all. So we launched it January 2020. A month later, COVID struck, and the participating householders need to have smart meters fitted to enable Octopus to see how much electricity they're using in real time, so that the wind energy can be metered exported into the grid every half hour, metered and distributed equally amongst the participating households, depending on how much electricity they used in real time. So it's very, very sophisticated, really. And I think Octopus had a challenge in getting the software correct. And I think we were a bit naive in jumping in right at the beginning with 50 householders, because if there are technical problems, then the householders get back to Octopus and it wastes a lot of time. Really, we should have had perhaps a smaller pilot. But anyway, with a bit of a teething trouble, it was launched. The farmer is very happy. What I really like is the price of the wind energy is agreed at the local level. So basically, the farmer actually joins a cooperative with the householder consumers, and between them, they agree on the local price for the wind energy supply. And when we first started, the farmer was only getting about 6p for export to the grid, and householders were paying 15p. So we agreed a compromise, a match price of about 11p. So the households were supplied with wind energy at 11p. Then with the crazy price hikes and massive inflation in electricity bills, the farmer was offered something like 18p for export, and households were paying 35 even after the government subsidy. So we agreed that the current price is 22p. So basically, Octopus honor that in a way, but they basically take a small cut from the farmer's generation, which he puts into the grid, not to the householders. If at night time households not using power, the farmer exports to Octopus, and he doesn't get such a good price as you would have otherwise. That's their cut of it. But also for Octopus, it's not too different to actually supplying a household with PV. Basically, they're still not making as much profit as they can because the house has got PV, but they're still interested in supplying all the backup power when the house is not using PV. So this is a bit similar to this. So the other issue is, because the electricity is actually supplied locally through the existing grid, and it's monitored, the exports monitored, the consumption's monitored, it has to be the same substation area, or the same 11,000 volt substation that the generator is connected to and the consumers are connected to. So in the town of Bridport, which is a population of about maybe 12,000, it covers about a 2 or 3 kilometer radius. So everybody who were signed to be members have to live in that area. Energy Local have been very, very good on their software. They've got a platform whereby anyone who's interested can just log on with their household details, and then Octopus contact them directly and arrange to get a smart meter fitted. The other thing to me, which was extremely important, was the householders can leave this scheme at any time without penalty. We, as a community energy group, we would never risk doing anything that would tie people in and perhaps cost them money. We would basically only went ahead with this because any householder can leave the scheme without penalty at any time and just switch back to another electricity supply company. So the beauty from our side of it is all they need to do is to have a smart meter fitted and switch to Octopus as this energy supplier, and nothing else we need to do. And apart from if there's problems, we have a few public meetings and things. And the other thing, which is pretty innovative really, is that the backup supply from Octopus is through a time of use tariff. So basically 4 different periods in the day. And it's, I don't know whether I've got, no, I haven't got the picture here. But basically, yeah, early evening when it's expensive for Octopus to buy in grid power, householders are paying something like, at the moment, I think it's probably about maybe 45p at current prices. But then overnight, Octopus give a very low price for 12 hours of 12p, even if it's not windy. So basically, what's encouraging really, this is the total, this is the real actual saving for the last month. Again, this is on the Energy Local national website. They provide all this backup software. Yeah, so people can log on and to their own account and see how much individuals have used. And anyone can log on to the group account of 50 householders together. This is the 50 householders together. And you can see the savings something like about 20% of the cost. And this is the night time. This is the peak time, and people are actually managing to use less electricity in the peak time. And this is the daytime use, and this is the wind. So if you look on the bar graph underneath, it's really quite interesting. So in the last month, probably maybe 40% of household use was wind energy in Bridport, in the households in Bridport. And pardon me. So yeah, it's working. And I'll just show you one really classic example. This is somebody with PV getting wind with an electric car as well, driven 6,000 miles a year. And this is, to me, really quite dramatic. He hasn't got any gas heating either. He uses a wood stove. So you could say, look, this is almost like an ideal futuristic carbon neutral home. And he's got no gas bill. His total cost of electricity is £500 a year, and that's including running an electric car. So this is what really motivates me, is renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels. And basically, to my mind, fossil fuels are basically just dominated and distorted the market. And if you can meter renewables separately and supply it separately, people can actually see that renewables are cheaper. And the other slightly interesting thing to me is that this wind turbine was actually privately owned. The farmer finances it himself, maintains it himself. So he needs to get a return to cover his costs. But then if you have community-owned generation, which is supplying local households, Energy Local Bridport went on to get a successful planning application to add 250 kilowatts of ground-mounted PV. That economically, viably can be supplied at about 13p a kilowatt hour. And that's based on the financial model that we've had a long track record of using for PV on roofs. What we supply the building for, what you could supply the householders for, would be about 14p a kilowatt hour at current prices. So it's just to me like a real win-win-win situation. But the barriers are huge, really, because we depend on octopus. The government is not supportive. I mean, Ollie have some inside view about this, but basically the House of Lords supported part of the government's electricity bill to include clauses from Power for the People, which would make every electricity company with more than 150,000 customers offer this local supply option, like Octopus have been doing. But of course, the current government then have took it out from the bill because they don't want it. And what makes me even more frustrated is that in the EU, this is actually becoming more and more mainstream. The European Commission have got legislation requiring every single country to enable this local electricity trading they call energy sharing, and not only generation supplying households, but households supplying each other, export from one house to export from another, and they're developing, small companies developing the software to enable this trading between householders as well. So it's like a direction of travel, and basically I believe our government and vested interests in our energy industry are preventing it. So yeah, we got lots of publicity on Meridian TV, Times, Telegraph. You know, people like the idea, you know, keeping the village lights on, saving people money. So that's going to finish my last slide. I'm not sure how I'm doing time-wise, probably okay. Last slide. I'm really keen to see this taking off. So through the Wessex Community Energy Network and Bath and North East Somerset Council, we're organising an Energy Democracy Conference on the 8th of November in the Guildhall in Bath. I'll put a I'll put the link in the chat if you want to go along to that. Just £10 to go because we have to cover the cost of lunch, and we're run by volunteers really, so we've got a very low budget. But if anyone's really interested, we've got speakers from Power from People, from Energy Local Totnes, from Bath and West Community Energy, and also an overview from Energy Local. And in the afternoon session, we're going to have an open panel discussion on these barriers and how to tackle the barriers to enable a rollout. Okay, I think that's my lot. I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Pete. I thought that was really interesting and valuable, and it made me remember that this was really why I set this particular webinar up, was because I want, you know, we want local people to be able to benefit from local projects. So it was really interesting, particularly the price. the fact that you can so much undercut the fossil fuel industry. I'm going to hand over next to, I can't remember who I was going to hand over to next. I think we should hand over next to Neil, who can talk about the changes in the planning guidance, and then after Neil we'll have Monika, who can talk about funding projects. So Neil, are you open?
Thanks very much. Just share my screen. Is that coming up? Cool. Thanks, Pete. That was a really good intro. I'm going to talk a bit more about the planning system. So I'd be really interested, Pete, in later on maybe if you could talk about how you found getting planning permission for that wind turbine, because that'd be really interesting. So my name's Neil Best. I'm a town planner, and I work for Centre for Sustainable Energy, CSE. CSE is going to be at that conference, actually the one that Pete mentioned. So some of my colleagues will be there. If anyone else is going to go along, be happy to talk to you. We're an independent national charity. We've been around since the late 70s, and our role as a charity is to try and support people and organisations tackling the climate emergency, but also tackling fuel poverty at the same time. One of the ways that we think we can do this is through planning system, because it's a really key tool in addressing climate change, or it should be. And earlier on in the year, we partnered up with the Town and Country Planning Association to do some research on behalf of the Climate Change Committee. The link's on the screen there, which will be shared around to you afterwards. This was quite a holistic look around the planning system as a whole, how it addresses climate change, sort of what it's doing well and what it isn't, what sort of barriers are in place and why, and what opportunities that exist to make it sort of better in the future. Part of that report looks at renewables and onshore wind, but it looks at climate more holistically as well. I put the link there because I thought some of you might find it of interest, and I'm going to refer to some of the findings during this presentation. I'm going to start with just some general thoughts on the planning system and its role in addressing climate change. So, like I said, we work up and down the country with organisations like community energy groups, probably some of the ones that you guys are involved with, parish and town councils, local authorities, and like I said, we work with other organisations like Climate Change Committee. You know, there's a lot of enthusiasm out there for delivering renewables and onshore wind, and I think that's sort of shown by the amount of people that have joined this meeting this morning. But delivery on the ground isn't matching that enthusiasm, and one big barrier to that is the planning system, and it's not working as well as it should do in addressing climate change more generally, or enabling specific mitigation adaptation measures like delivery of renewables. I'm going to focus this on a presentation on sort of the changes that have been made to the planning system over the last couple of months. Talk you through those, but it's worth starting this around what changed and why we're talking about this in the first place. So back in 2015, Greg Clark, then Minister, on behalf of the government, changed firstly through a ministerial statement and then changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, the rules around onshore wind. And it's very commonly known as the sort of de facto ban on getting planning permission for wind. It's not banned. Wind schemes are still coming through, but it is very, very, very difficult. It's much more difficult than it was prior to 2015. And some of those reasons because there's lots of hurdles to jump through, including, for example, each local authority having to allocate suitable areas for wind in their local plan, and a requirement to demonstrate clear community support when proposals come forward. And then in 2016, very large, or bigger commercial scale wind schemes, those above 50 megawatts, that were previously part of a separate nationally significant infrastructure projects regime were removed from that and put back into the Town and Country Planning Act. So it doesn't matter now how big or small a wind scheme is, they're all determined through that Town and Country Planning Act by local planning authorities through planning applications, which is completely different to, you know, large scale renewables of other technologies. And it means, you know, that basically onshore wind is treated differently to any other form of infrastructure in terms of how it's assessed. The results of that, this is some research that was done by Regen, mean that since 2018, very little onshore wind has been deployed in England. You can see the difference between Wales and Scotland, which are covered by different planning acts. England has, despite its potential, has not sort of deployed anywhere near as much onshore wind as the other devolved nations. And that's mainly because of the planning barriers. So in September this year, you may have seen in the media reports that this de facto ban has been lifted. Following an earlier consultation on national planning policy, we had a new written ministerial statement, this time by Michael Gove, and then changes were made to the NPPF, and I'll take you through what those were in a second. And that's chapter 14 of the NPPF for those of you that are up to speed with your chapter numbers of planning policy. The overall aim stated by the government was to try and strike a better balance between the views of local communities in terms of things like considering impact of wind turbines on things like landscape character, and allowing local authorities to respond more flexibly to suitable opportunities for onshore wind. The sort of media headlines were around that the lifting of the de facto ban had happened, but I'll go through it and I'll be interested to see if you think that's reality or not. So there's 3 slides, I think, here on actually what changed last month. The first was around repowering. So this is where sort of older wind farms coming to the end of their life are repowered with new wind turbines, usually bigger, more modern, efficient ones. 2 chapters of the NPPF were updated. There's a paragraph 155A, which now includes mention of repowering, so or sort of life extension of renewables. So that policy now says, to help increase the use and supply of renewable and low carbon energy and heat, plans should provide a positive strategy for energy from these sources that maximises the potential for suitable development and their future repowering and life extension, whilst ensuring that those adverse effects are addressed appropriately. So it specifically now acknowledges that repowering of older wind farms is a thing that planners need to consider, and it sort of gives positive support for doing that. And then there's a new paragraph inserted, which is now paragraph 158C, again on repowering and life extension. And that says that when determining planning applications for renewable and low carbon development, local planning authorities should, in the case of those applications, give significant weight to the benefits of using or utilising an established site and approve the proposal if its impacts are or can be made acceptable. So it gives quite positive guidance there, or steer to local planning authorities to approve those applications, but acknowledging the fact that quite often those ones will be, you're not replacing like for like on these schemes. New turbines are generally quite larger than the older, less efficient ones. So that's in there. That's all on sort of focus on repowering. There's a section now on sort of alternative routes to getting permission for wind turbines. In paragraph 158A of the NPPF, there's a new footnote 53A, which talks about those alternative routes. So that's alternative routes other than achieving planning permission for a planning application. So it says that wind energy development involving one or more turbines can also be permitted through local development orders, neighbourhood development orders, and community right to build orders. And in the case of LDOs, it should be demonstrated the planning impacts identified by the affected local community have been appropriately addressed, and that the proposal has community support. I've inserted some links there that you can go look at afterwards to give you a bit more information about what those things are. But essentially, local development orders and neighbour development orders, or community right to build orders, all do the same thing. They will provide permitted development rights in a specified area, which means that once that order is in place, there's already sort of in principle planning permission for a certain defined type of development. So that could be wind, which means you wouldn't have to go through the traditional planning application route to get permission for your wind turbine. But they are led by either a local planning authority or a town or parish council or other qualifying body, in the same way that like a neighbourhood plan is. So that's in there. And then there's a section on sort of making impacts of wind acceptable. So this is contained in paragraph 158B of the NPPF, and there's an updated footnote, the sort of notorious footnote 54, which is the one that gives a lot of additional caveats and hurdles for onshore wind. But it says, basically it says, except for applications for the repowering and life extension of existing wind turbines, planning application for wind energy development involving one or more turbines should not be considered acceptable unless it is in an area identified as suitable for wind energy development in the development plan or a supplementary planning document. So that's new, it's another new route. And then following consultation, it can be demonstrated that the planning impacts identified by the affected local community have been appropriately addressed and the proposal has their community support. So the form of the old wording is being struck out and the new wording is highlighted and underlined. So you can see there's some tweaks, there's like nuances, you know, it's not radical changes, but there are some tweaks made there. So and that's it. That was what was changed. So my sort of review of that is that it moves the needle ever so slightly in favour of getting planning permission for onshore wind, but it doesn't go anywhere near far enough. It's not radical. It doesn't. It's not the sort of widespread changes that were maybe reported in the media. Footnote 54 is still there. It still means that onshore wind faces additional planning hurdles that aren't faced by any other forms of infrastructure. And it means there's a burden in place either on local planning authorities or town and parish councils to designate suitable areas for onshore wind in their plans. And that has resource implications because there's evidence required to back those things up, which cost money. There's a supplementary planning document option that might speed things up. There's those community allocation routes. I don't know how realistic they are. I've never been involved with one, but I'd be interested to hear any views on that if anyone has been. There's still a lack of clarity on how to measure community support when bringing forward these proposals. And there's still the option there to just risk it. You can put in a planning application anyway and argue that material circumstances outweigh the NPPF considerations, but you know, who likes risk? On the right-hand side, I've put there just the sort of reaction from industry, from Renewable UK, so they're the voice of sort of commercial developers. They say proposed changes don't go far enough. Planning systems still stacked against onshore wind, still treated differently, still hurdles to navigate, slight softening at the edges, but nothing more. So, you know, from their point of view, from a commercial standpoint, they're not seeing this is going to change anything significantly. We're not going to see loads of new investment in onshore wind with these changes. But, you know, and this sort of matters. This is a graph from our Climate Change Committee report. And this was a question we asked local planning authorities on, does their local plan currently include or identify areas, suitable areas for onshore wind? And only about 11% currently do, which means you know, most of the country is covered by a local plan which doesn't, which means that schemes coming forward in those areas already face significant hurdles of getting permission. which is really, really, frustrating, and doesn't need to be that way. And I'll find it just final couple slides. This is the Climate Change Committee sort of most recent report on progress. It notes government doesn't have a target for onshore wind capacity, but from their analysis from the current or the sixth carbon budget and the balanced pathway to get there, they're saying we're slightly off track. Current national deployment rates are slightly off track compared to that pathway. We need about 28 gigawatts of capacity of onshore wind by that says 3035. It should be 2035. Sorry. Current capacity is around 15 gigawatts. So there's, you can see that purple bar there, and it needs to ramp up significantly. And I don't think these current changes enable that to happen. But I'll just leave it on a more positive point. There's still paragraph 156 of the MPPF there, which says that local planning authorities should support community-led initiatives for renewables and low carbon energy, including developments outside areas identified in local plans suitable for onshore wind. But it gives that caveat that those should be things that are taken forward through neighbourhood planning. So my key takeaway from this is still like engagement with either local plans or neighbourhood plans is really important and could open the door for led energy. CSE's got a lot of sort of resources on how you might go about doing some of that stuff. So we've got guides on how to write a neighbourhood plan in a climate emergency, and there's advice there in terms of policy writing and community engagement. We've got a separate guide on how to identify suitable areas for onshore wind in the neighbourhood plan. And we also run a programme called Future Energy Landscapes, which is a community consultation method. The picture there is one of those that we did last summer, a community fair. And it's all about trying to build community support for onshore wind in your very local area and allowing you to consider, landscape impacts, etc. And it's a way of trying to build community consensus, because I think whatever route you might go down to getting or delivering onshore wind, you need that community support. So I think that's the last one. Thank you very much. That's my email if anyone ever wants to contact me. And those slides I think will get shared around. So thank you very much.
Neil, thank you so much. I found that very valuable. I'm sorry about the echo. I hope that's better, but it's not. So without ado, I'll move over to Monika because I can't sort out the echo.
Thank you, Liz. Hi, everyone. Oli, Liz, thank you for inviting me to do this presentation. I really enjoyed listening to the previous two speakers. I hope what I will present today will be maybe a little bit of beacon of hope. So let's see. Let me just put my presentation up. And while I'm doing this, apologies, I have a cold. I need to at some point excuse myself, have a sip of water. Okay. Hi, everyone. So my name is Monika Paplaczyk. I am investment director at a company called Strive Renewables. It's a company with a mission to power the transition to a sustainable energy future by helping people meaningfully connect with clean energy projects. And how do we do it? Well, we've been doing this for the last 30 years. We were set up in 1994 by Traders Bank. With initially a community of 500 people. Today, we have over 7,000 investors who invested in Thrive. In that time, we have built, funded 39 projects. We don't, today we carry on operating 22 of those projects. Many of the projects we've invested in were loans or short-term bridges, which then I'll come to examples later how it works, but it means that we no longer operate them now. Our current assets under management is 110 million. We occupy a niche between what communities would do on their own, perhaps projects like Pete has been talking about, and the larger sort of utility scale projects. So typically that is between 1 megawatt or 1 million to 30 million sort of project. What we do is we provide a flexible capital to fund projects. So what that means is that we can work with community groups and developers in different structures. It can be acquisition of projects, it can be co-investments, it can be loans and bridge loans. And we very much, with our experience we built over the years, we can share that experience with communities in the investment process as well. And I'll share some examples with you later. I will start. I'll start with a similar region report that Neil was referring to. I guess what is interesting is that is the overwhelming support in England for onshore wind. So 79% of population in England supports development of onshore wind. 16% somehow, 4% is totally against. Sadly, that does not correspond to the amount of projects that have been built in the last, especially 7 years. And I've got a map there of projects built in 2020, 2021, 2022. As you can see, there's been very little. And in 2023, which is not on the map, one project was built in Bristol. It's a case study later. Okay, so what are the different ways of funding your energy project? Doesn't have to be just onshore wind, could be any technology. So I just wanted to point out to some of the typical kind of structures that we have seen over the years. So crowdfunding, funding projects through bonds, project finance, which basically means banks providing loans to projects, junior finance or junior loans, which is, you might also hear a phrase used as mezzanine loans. So this is usually a little bit more risky investment than what banks would do. But often banks would only fund, say, 60% or 70% of a project, and you still need that, the funding for the remaining amount, and this is where junior loans help. Bridge loans, which would be loans to project when you need to raise finance quickly, get something built, and then later bring other forms of finance. So bridge is really helpful. In recent years, we've seen more portfolio loans. So you have a range of projects at different stages. You bring in finance on the portfolio level, and then projects within that portfolio are funded with this facility. And also, we think increasingly joint ventures and shared ownership, which I'd like to talk more about shortly. In terms of which type of investment you should choose, you should probably look at all of this, and really depends on what is the state of your project. You should consider what are your objectives, how much funding and your own equity you have, and what is your strategy in terms of the community aspect. Do you want to own the project? Do you want to maximize benefits from it? Do you want to collaborate with other developers in the area? So really think about your objectives and then look at what the different forms of finance are. I also highlighted which of these sort of forms of finance we as Strive can help with on the slide. And I just wanted to go into a little bit of more detail of three of those models. So the community funding model in the form of bridge is when a community group is trying to acquire a project quickly, perhaps, or you have planning permission for a project and you need to build it and secure your wind turbines, secure other equipment, but you're not quite ready for a bank finance. This is where a bridge.
I'm just going to stop you for a moment because we seem to have quite a serious echo issue going on, coming from your computer, and we're not quite sure what to do, and it's making it difficult for people to hear properly. So I'm very sorry to stop you, but I'm just wondering what on earth we can do. Is there anyone here who's more technical than me and might have a suggestion?
Well, I was going to say, I just wonder, Monika, if you've got something else open on your laptop. No, of course not. It's just a very slight echo that
Right. I put myself. I reduce the volume. How's that?
I'll try that.
Does this sound okay?
It's still a bit echoey, which is very odd because you're on your own, aren't you?
Yes, and I mean on my own in the meeting room.
I think sometimes it's Wi-Fi lag.
Oh, okay. Susie, who's our technical advisor, thinks it's Wi-Fi lag. And Kat
Why
Hopkins
not?
says,
Why
have you
not?
got a headset?
Why not? Can I suggest maybe Monica, you come off
What if I stop sharing the presentation? Does it help?
or come off camera?
I think the suggestion, if you have a headset, have you got a headset? Because that might help. Yeah, there's no one else in the same room as Monica.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, no, I'm just answering some of the people. Everyone's trying to help you.
You're all friends and you're all, yeah, all amazing.
And someone else has said, hang on a minute.
Yeah, a headset and a microphone make a big difference generally.
Oh, well said, Mike.
I thought that was wrong.
How is that?
Oh, yes.
Does it help?
Yes,
Yeah.
that we have solved the, yes, brilliant. So we can go
Amazing,
back.
amazing. Well, thank you. Great. So what do we do? Should I go back or?
Yeah, go back. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Apologies for this. I did not realize
No,
the challenge with that.
Sorry, it was slowly getting more and more echoey. So yeah, but it's, and we all want to hear what you've got to say, of course. So,
absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay.
Adrian says that's brilliant.
Okay, fantastic. Where shall I go back? This one, I guess.
From there. Is that right with everyone? Thumbs up if you're up for going from there. I think thumbs up. Oh, I've seen and some nods.
Okay, the previous one was just drive pitch. So yeah, sorry. Actually, this one was quite good. Yes. So yeah, I mean that tells itself a story, really. UK wants wind, UK doesn't get wind. So yeah, England specifically. So anything we can do to really promote this, I think is it's important. Okay. So this slide. So this was very much about what are the different ways of funding your project. I've tried to capture all the different ways that I have seen on projects. So I need different stages. So very shortly, so crowdfunding is when you are when you want to bring ownership or investment from community. It could be a national community. This isn't always just people in your own area, and we've seen all approaches. And I've seen this used sometimes very early on in the project stage, sometimes kind of later, construction operations, bond issuance via crowdfunding platforms, very similar to crowdfunding, but this is specifically bond, not an ownership as such. But it's very, very useful form of finance, and there's a number of crowdfunding platforms that do that. Project finance. So project finance is when you work with bank and bank provides debt to project. There's a number of banks financing projects for community groups. Typically, the earliest the banks will come in is when you have project planning, grid, land, but also you're really ready to go. So you have all the project contracts, you have your PPA, you have negotiated absolutely every contract, you have all studies, absolutely everything. So I have seen projects which had planning, had grid, and had a lease, but they were not quite ready for project finance with banks. So just something to be kind of aware of in terms of the bankability of project. Junior loans. So junior loans are when say bank provides you with 60 to 70% funding, but you still need to raise more equity, and maybe you've got a little bit from crowdfunding, but not quite, then junior loans or mezzanine loans can be really helpful. This is where those sort of facilities can plug the funding gap, as we would say. But they could also be there. Junior lender takes a little bit more risk. So I have also seen those sort of structures sometimes even in the development phase. Yeah, it doesn't just have to be at construction. Bridge loans, again, it's a little bit more creative, but this is when you're progressing your project well and you need to start kind of paying deposits, or you need to actually just crack on and start building it, but you might not quite be ready for a full project finance, or your crowdfunding isn't quite ready and you're not sure how much money you will raise from it. Then this is where the bridge funds come really useful. So this tends to be a shorter term. The bridge funder will allow you to later refinance that facility. And it's really useful in the context of community space. Portfolio loans, I see this becoming quite on the sort of more commercial projects. I see this used quite a lot now by developers and project owners. So if you have more than one project, you can bring financing into a portfolio, and then projects within that portfolio are funded. But what it means is you just have one facility at the portfolio level, one security kind of structure, and it does give you a bit more flexibility. And from a funder perspective, it spreads the risk as well between the different projects. So you might be able to get better terms comparing to what you would do with a single facility. And a final point on the another trend, which I personally think is amazing, is trying to get to a place where community groups can take shared ownership and go into joint ventures with developers. There's a number of large projects being developed around UK, huge wind projects, huge solar farms, and I think it's a shame when communities are not part of that development. And I would encourage ambition and say, why not approach those big developers and ask for ability to participate in those projects and take on 20, maybe even 50% share in those schemes. Especially that planning on those large schemes does need community consensus as well. So make the most of this. On the slide, I also noted where Thrive can come in and can help you. So if you have any projects that kind of fall in any of these categories, feel free to get in touch. I then just wanted to highlight some of from these schemes, kind of three that especially at Thrive we have focused on. So community funding bridge, shared ownership, and co-development. So we're very keen to work with communities on kind of within those three main areas and help you facilitate either bridge and getting projects built, shared ownership, and co-development. So if you're looking for a development partner early on in your project development, we'd be very interested talking to you. And then I have some case studies. I've got three from our portfolio. So the first one is Meanmore. So this is a wind farm in Cumbria. It's a project which was built in 2017, I believe. And it's one where community group associated with Energy for All, which I'm sure you all know, they had a project next door, basically, and then a developer was developing neighboring site, which was 3 turbines. And they have pre-agreed sort of exclusivity that at some point, if the project was going through sale, that the community would buy the project from the developer. And we have helped Energy for All and the community group to facilitate that acquisition. So right after the project construction, we provided bridge finance to the community. They acquired the project, and then within 4 years, they were able to raise money through crowdfunding, and they effectively, bought out kind of our investment. So now they own the project 100%. And Energy for All did a fantastic job on kind of making the help all happen at the time. And I believe maybe still it's probably the largest community wind farm that's kind of gone through that process of buying it from a developer. It's 6.9 megawatt project. Next one is Ambition Community Energy, which is a project in Bristol. So a group from Lawrence Weston, which is on the outskirts of Bristol, felt that there's lots of commercial wind projects going on in the Avonmouth area of Bristol, which is on their doorstep. And they felt they really want to own a wind farm as well, and benefits from which would go and flow into the community itself and support various initiatives locally. So literally from the a pub idea, it became a reality. It took them 7 years, but they have taken the project through planning, obtained grid, obtained land leases, negotiated turbine supply agreement, and etc. Thrive provided them with a loan to fund the project. They also had loans from other local funders. And yeah, amazing is project is now up. If you're passing by Bristol, you can see it. It went into operations in the summer. And yeah, really amazing case study that shows perseverance. Getting the right people around really works, even if the planning environment isn't very helpful. And they had to go through a lot of jumps on planning. And I also have another case study, Radio City Association, which is a very fresh case study just from this week, actually. So we funded a project in Scotland this time. So Radio City Association is a group around town called Kilberny, which is in North Ayrshire, and they have a very similar dream to the Bristol group to own a wind turbine. As you know, in Scotland, there's lots of wind turbines and absolutely popping everywhere, which is great. But communities feel they also want to be taking a share of these, so they decided to own a project. So they've gone through planning successfully, and in the last 8 months, they worked tirelessly to get this project into a stage where it can go into construction. So they've now negotiated all the contracts they needed. Thrive provided them with funding, and so did other funders from Scotland. And yeah, over the next year, we will see this project being built and going to hopefully community ownership in December next year, when they will be able to benefit from it. I also have a film, which I'm not going to try technology, given some of the challenges we had, but I will put a link into the chat so you can watch it afterwards. This is a film from the Bristol project, which is, so this is the film. And just finally, sorry. No, the film has gone. Anyway. No, seems like I cannot show the last slide.
I think, for the film, given how technology has been today.
I think so. And I also will put into the chat our a guide we have produced for the communities on how to fund community energy projects. Yeah, great. Happy to answer any questions you might have, and again, sorry for technicalities.
Thank you very much, Monika. I think it's been a really interesting morning. I'm slightly distracted by our technical issues, but I think there've been some really interesting presentations. I think Ollie was particularly struck as why are not more people doing what Energy Local Bridport did? Is that right, Ollie?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that, Pete, and have loved following you through that program, and that link to the local substation and local suppliers, just brilliant. Are you aware of other projects like that developing across the country?
Yeah, Ollie. So this conference we're organising in Bath on the 8th of November,
Yeah.
there's been an overview from Energy Local. There's 29 projects at various stages of development. There's one or two other electricity supply companies in addition to Octopus are interested. But my personal experience is it's not straightforward. We're dependent really on National Energy Local and on Octopus at the moment. For Octopus, it's been quite a challenge, I believe, to get the software. Really, it's more sophisticated than I said even. Basically, Octopus monitor the wind export every half hour. They monitor the consumption from 50 householders every half hour. They divide the export with the consumption. But then if some are using more and some are using less, this algorithm recalculates and gives those who are using more wind energy at that particular time more wind energy. So it's extremely sophisticated. And as it was mentioned, perhaps we should hear a bit about this, the Octopus Fan Club, which I think is probably simpler for Octopus to manage, where they actually physically own the wind turbine, just 2 or 3 wind turbines at the moment. And anybody within the same postcode area gets cheaper electricity, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's simpler for them to manage in some way. So in summary, I would just say the technicalities are very complex, and it actually, I was at the European Sustainable Energy Week in Brussels in June. The final presentation was from DG Energy, the Directorate for Energy for Europe. And one of the 2 presenters said, he held up his mobile phone. He said, 10 years ago, nobody would have believed that this technology was possible. He said in 10 years' time, he believed any citizen of Europe will be able to buy local, cheaper, renewable electricity through an app on this phone. So the EU really believe it's the future. But in the UK, I would say it's going to be a challenge, but I'm positive because the economics make sense and the technology exists, smart meters exist. It will happen, but it's not straightforward. Out of those 29 projects in development, I think only 9 are actually operating at the moment.
There were also a couple of people who asked how you got planning permission.
Well, that's a good story as well, Liz, because basically I was actually employed by Dorset County Council at the time of this planning application. It was my job to support renewable energy. I supported the planning application. It was only 50 kilowatt wind turbine, but you've got to bear in mind, as Henry Lovegrove there will know, we've only got actually 2 wind turbines at Dorset. There's really, really, really anti-wind. And the rumor was that the planning officer that gave approval was dismissed afterwards. Basically, it got through. I think the planning officer didn't realize 50 kilowatts is fairly substantial. He thought it was something like a rooftop wind turbine or something. So it was a mistake.
Gosh.
Yeah.
That's quite worrying.
Yeah, but because it was already generating, and because Dorset Community Energy already knew the farmer, he was chair of the village hall where we installed solar panels. We got to know him through that. He came to us and said, well, Pete, he said, look, I've got this wind turbine. I'm not getting much power, not much more for export. Can you sell that power locally? And that's how that linked to working with Energy Local. So it's a lot easier when you already had the wind generation to start with. It already got through planning. It was already generating before we started the Energy Local Club.
Thank you. Danny L has had about 3 or 4 questions, so I've just asked him to unmute. So Danny, I'll hand over to you for your 3 or 4 questions you've been asking. I'm assuming they're not all rhetorical. Oh, where's he gone? Danny? Okay, well, he's unmuted, but I can't see or hear him. So while I wait for Danny, you're welcome to interrupt me, Danny. While I wait for that, I was just wondering if you've if Energy Local sells their concept to farmers. Oh, Danny's having a sound problem, so we'll wait. Danny, just speak up when you've sorted it then. In that case, we have had other questions and I've just lost track of them. So if anyone has a question, for now, I just invite you to just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, great.
It's Danny.
Yeah. Good morning, and thank you very much. A fascinating overview, Pete, of your situation. I think you sort of answered my question. It was the challenge of planning for the farmer, because clearly I'm close to the South Downs National Park. We're going to have a real battle on our hands to try and achieve what that one farmer did. And I was also very conscious of the fact that across the South Downs, and Ollie probably knows more about it than I do, you know, most of the land, something like 70% of the land, is owned by 18 major landowners. We're talking, you know, thousands and thousands of acres. So really, it's what's the tip? What's the approach? And CSE might want to chip in. How do we get this underway on the similar level of success that you've had? And then the other question I had was that obviously, surely there's an issue about grid capacity. Isn't that going to be the detracting factor in our aspirations?
Great questions, Danny. Pete and Neil, and even Monica, if you have any response.
I'd be happy to come in on the grid point.
Okay.
Whilst maybe using of the other questions. Grid is the major issue right now in UK, I would say, in terms of development of new projects. We see a huge time frames. Some of the projects we've seen have grid delivery dates, almost into well into 2030s. Yeah. So when you are looking at development of project, really consider the grid position quite early on. However, Ofgem, National Grid, DESNZ, and also the local DNOs, they're doing a lot of work to improve the situation. So there is a sort of short-term plan and then a long-term plan. And it's really worth kind of following all of those developments, because it might mean that even if you were told maybe 2 years ago or a year ago that, you know, your grid delivery date will be this, there is a lot of potential that actually that might be shorter. So keep an eye. I think the next there will be a big announcement in November, we believe, and then within the next 6 months. Essentially, you know, this a program of improvements what to change. So, for example, a lot of the spare grid capacity in UK was sort of booked by battery storage. And what the grid is looking to do is, just because the way batteries are used on the system, they're not used in the same way as renewables. They're kind of enabling more renewables. So yeah, they would be, they should be counted as part of the, the overall capacity. So there will be lots of changes coming. So yeah, I think it's worth checking. Regen is doing a lot of work on this, so they can be very useful sources of information as well.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you.
Holly, have you anything you want to say on grid capacity?
Well, I do actually. Yes, if you don't mind, just on the back, and that's really reassuring to hear from Monika on that. Now, you know, based on what we've heard from Pete West, you know, and the way the market is changing and technology changing, where some of these projects can exist is alongside the LV and the HV networks. So we heard Pete talk about, you know, the commonality of his project is one substation, you know, so it's like a tree, you know, the electricity comes from a substation into our communities. The electricity networks they work towards the HV network, so they look at the capacity on the system as a whole. But actually, when you start really delving down into the LV networks, i.e. the power that comes to our homes and to our communities, there is actually a lot of power lost. So in diving into a local community, say a village or a focused community, my view is that we will start to get to the stage where we can find capacity on the grid locally by managing the electricity in a clever way. And that's why the electricity networks are starting to change, to become disparate service operators, you know, this whole flexibility thing. An example of that is exactly what Pete's doing in Dorset, but also to bring it alive for all of you, in after the tsunami in Japan, when all the nuclear power stations got knocked out, the Japanese instigated a traffic light system for energy usage. So literally it was on everybody's television. So when the traffic light was red, people were told to reduce their energy usage. But when it was green, they were told, encouraged to. And that's where we need to try and get to in this whole sort of renewables world. And I think we will, in the next 5 or 6 years, get to that place. If the political situation changes, the electricity bill comes forward. So it's just, you know, take it through the process, put the flag in the ground, get it into your local plan, look to see if you can build a project. And yeah, sorry if that was a bit long, but it was just kind of a call to arms, if you like.
Thank you, Ollie, for your call to arms. Richard from Suffolk, has that answered your question or provoked more discussion? And Sam Wilberforce also had a comment, which is in the chat box. I don't know if you want to contribute that comment as part of the discussion.
I think it has answered my question, thank you, about grid connectivity, because we've, on a different subject, we're looking at a solar farm for Debenham, a very small one, but we went through the grid connectivity process and we had a date come back of 2028, and that was 2 years ago. So, and they wanted £50,000 up front just to get onto the queue. The amounts of money that are being talked about are quite phenomenal in that respect. And I'm very pleased to hear what Monika was saying, that seems to be changing going forward. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and Richard, you know, you've got the Community Energy Fund is now going to be live in the next week or two. It's exactly what that is there to support you for, to prepare your projects. And 2028 will come very quickly, you know, in the lifetime of a project. So yeah.
Thank you.
I'll give you up to £140,000 to get your project ready.
And if I might come on this, and you know, many commercial developers, even though those deadlines are so long, they're going for it. So it kind of feels like, you know, we need to find this community energy ways of also booking those, even though they might be longer term grid connection agreement, you know, offers. Otherwise, in few years, it would be all kind of already, you know, we'd be so far in the queue. So yeah, if there's ways of funding it with grants or, yeah, like, you know, I explained earlier, bridge loans or joint ventures with maybe developers, I think, yeah.
Thank you. Sam, did you want to say anything additional or ask anything additional?
Well, it's just very difficult to, with that uncertainty. So I said yesterday we got from SSEN that we might not get it before 2037, but if we apply, we might get enough people apply, then they will shorten the, you know, might even get it done in a couple of years, but we have to put our name down to be at the front of the queue. And if you've got to raise £50,000 on spec or something that might happen in 15 years, I think that's very difficult for a community float.
Well, is that something the Community Energy Fund can help with, and local area energy planning and local plans? And that's maybe a question for Neil as well.
Sorry, I got a bit distracted. Somebody came in the room. We've got a climate hub here, and a councillor's come in to ask me a question. I do apologise. So,
I'll hand the question over to Neil first, because
yeah, he'd be good at that.
I was just going to make the point, some of the work we've been doing with National Grid, looking at their like future energy scenarios, for example, they do recognize it and identify this as like a real problem at the moment. And they want to get to a place in the future whereby this whole grid connection process is transformed, and that basically like grid upgrades can happen in advance of you know, renewable energy schemes coming forward. So the grid capacity follows sort of policy route rather than you know, a developer coming to them and saying I want to connect, and then saying, oh yeah, you can connect but not in for 15 years, because that's just ridiculous. So they are like acutely aware of that, but at the moment, yeah, we're in a position where grid constraints can scupper proposals, but it isn't sort of uniform around the country. Some areas do have capacity, some areas don't.
Neil, is this somewhere that your observations about local plans and also the work that some groups do in local area energy planning could have an impact?
Yeah, one of our observations for them is that there's a complete disconnect really between the local planning process and the grid planning process. Like they don't really talk to each other that well. Timescales don't align very well, and you get this situation, you know. But there are lots of opportunities to improve that.
Thank you. Right, over to Christina, who has a question.
Hi, yeah, I'm Christina Bristow from Seaford Town Council on the South Coast. We've got an upcoming project which is the renovation of an old barn on top of quite a windy hill. And we're looking at possible ways to heat and power the barn, but also I'm trying to think a little bit more widely about, for example, if we are able to put a turbine in, could we follow one of the models, for example, at Bridport or some other, and sort of combine with a community energy type model where we're then able to sell any excess power in the local area? And I'm just wondering, within projects, have you had many projects where a local authority, particularly a smaller sort of parish council type, are working with other local players to make that happen? Part of the reason I'm asking is because to finance the renovation of the barn, we're also, you know, looking at ways which we can get funding in, and one of those for me is to be able to sell and export some of the power, but I'd like to do it in a socially responsible way and a way in which we can help our immediate community as well. So I'm just wondering if anyone's got any thoughts on that kind of setup.
Ollie and Pete?
Well, I'll start. I mean, Christina, obviously we know each other, so you should contact your local community energy group to ask them to support for that. But yeah, I mean, in all of this, you know, and I know you're a councillor as well, and I know the building involved. We've got to set up the ecosystem to allow for these things to happen, and that is, you know, at a council level, parish level, but also community level, UKPN, the national park, the local authorities. We've got to bring all these parts together, and that's what the essence of local community energy projects is all about, is bringing all the players together and just looking at the art of the possible. And you can only do that when you bring all stakeholders together to work together. So, you know, I suppose my message on the back of that is reach out to your local community energy groups, or if you don't have a community energy group, come back to Community Energy South and get us to support you to connect those stakeholders together. Because there's another element in the background, as well as looking at building a project like that, there's discussion that needs to be had with the electricity networks, so with UK Power Networks in the southeast, or National Grid Energy Transmission in the southwest, and the other ones wherever you are in the country, SS&E. You need to consider speaking to the innovation teams at the electricity networks. They love speaking with communities. they are actually, they do a big box ticking exercise with the regulator if they do actually engage with you as a community. So, you know, build your project at the concept and then bring in all the stakeholders, and the community sector will help you with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could add a little bit, Christina, it would be a lovely concept. I'm sure if you could have wind turbine providing cheap electricity to the building and to the wider community. At the moment, Octopus are not able to manage that. They can only manage renewable generation that's putting straight into the grid, and even that's challenging. You could contact the national organisation Energy Local. As Ollie said, though, this is going to be a few years down the line. And there's another electricity supply company, a smaller company called 100 Green, used to be called Green Energy UK, that are doing a project with Totnes, with the Totnes Renewable Energy Society, Tresog. And they actually got PV on a local authority building, supplying local people. That's a pilot just starting with a different company. And it's really quite interesting because Totnes are calling it Energy Local Plus, and they want to take that one step forward. So householders with PV on the roofs can actually sell power to other households. So some people call it a virtual power plant. And I think Totnes have got £100,000 of grant funding to develop this whole concept of a whole community being supplied by several generators. So it's worth following up, but it's again, I keep saying it's not easy.
Thank you very much for your insights. Thank you.
We've got 5 minutes left. I can't believe how quickly the time's gone. And so I'd like to hand probably the last question over to Sarah James from the Vale of White Horse, because Sarah, you asked quite a few questions, and your last question is very close to my heart.
Thank you. Was that the one about solar?
It was the one about going into shared ownership, but you ask all your questions in one and let's get them all answered.
Oh, yeah, I was kind of replying to someone else. I wondered if, so I feel like I've heard, possibly in this talk, that is it possible to have, is there any community shared ownership of offshore wind? Because that's what the UK has tons of. I think we're still the world leader in that.
I think we're losing our offshore position to other countries.
Well, we're bound to, and quite little compared to some of the ones coming in now.
But in terms of resource, absolutely, yeah, we should be the leader.
But obviously they're on a scale where, you know, like a community's not going to raise the funds and build an offshore wind farm. Are there any opportunities there?
I mean, I must say it's my personal dream that should happen. You know, it's a shame that, why not have ownership by community? And, you know, it's our own kind of our resource. There is some projects, there are some initiatives. There is people are, it's no longer a crazy idea. And, you know, I'm kind of referring to my own idea, that being, and when I was talking about that years ago, it seemed like, it's just not feasible. But there are, it becomes an interesting concept, and there are some already. So Energy for All are looking at something like this, and so are we. So I think there's some early signs this will happen at some point. But we're probably talking about, because, you know, projects like this, they take a while to develop anyway. So we probably are talking about a few years before it becomes reality. But keep steering the idea. I think it should happen.
That definitely sounds like a watch this space sort of comment there, Monika.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's thank you so much. Right? Yeah, saying that. Yeah. The more people say this, I think the more it becomes viable.
Yeah. Well, it's coming
a bit more optimistic, actually, Monika. I don't have really a lot of direct information, but there is an organization called Ripple Energy Cooperative. It is actually a registered cooperative. Yeah. And they just did the biggest share offer in British history to finance investment in renewable energy. They've got a connection with a well-established renewable developer, Renewable Energy Systems. They've been around since the 90s. And I actually personally invested with Ripple in a 42 megawatt solar farm being built at the moment in Devon, Beryl Farm. there's that side of it. So it is happening, and they seem to be quite good to me, because what they do is they say the investor should only really invest the same capital as would meet their own electricity demand. The export is sold into the grid, and basically the profit from the transaction is distributed to the shareholders, to the members, pro rata their investment. So and also they give priority investment to the people living nearest to the renewable generation. So it seemed to me pretty solid approach, actually. The other slightly interesting thing, I know there's a friend of mine, a solicitor, Sonia Bedford, who is actually a member of our Wessex Community Network. She was employed for a time by the Welsh Assembly, Welsh Government, to look into an offshore wind farm proposal. I think it's floating wind, actually, in the Irish Sea, connected into Wales. And the Welsh Government wanted 10% of the offshore wind investment to be available for local people. And she was the consultant. If you can contact her, if you email me, I can give you her contact details and see how far that got with offshore wind. Sonia Bedford.
Thank you, Pete. So just, yes, any last comments from Neil or Ollie? And yeah, really thank you, everyone. I think it's been really informative. Neil?
I'll just say, maybe finish on some of our observations from running our community engagement workshops on future energy landscapes and building community consent, because I think, you know, whatever routes you go down to try and deliver schemes on the ground, community consent engagement is absolutely important and crucial. And some of the sort of key messages that keep coming back to us are that people are likely to support onshore wind near them if they have a meaningful say in sort of where those schemes are developed, and if they have some kind of meaningful benefit, if they actually have, you know, financial or otherwise, some derive some benefit from hosting those renewables. So schemes like community ownership, or, you know, varieties of that are brilliant in doing so. But just sort of messaging around local communities being self-sufficient in energy resonates really strongly. And that kind of thinking, I think, is really great. So community energy, you know, from a CSE point of view, absolutely brilliant. Well done.
Thank you, Neil. Ollie, have you any last comments you'd like to make? We've gone 1 minute over time, so.
Okay, well, just to say thank you very much, you know, to Neil, Pete, and Monika. You know, to look at the planning side, projects that can actually be realised through Pete, and the financial, you know, shared ownership advice from Monika. You know, those are all the parts of the puzzle that we need support with. So thank you, guys. It's fantastic to hear from you. And just, you know, call to arms, really. Wherever you are, do reach out to the Community Energy South team, and we'll see if we can help you. If not, connect you across the country. You know, we're stronger together, and we're seeing movement, you know, and a lot of support coming from local authorities. And yeah, join the debate. Community Energy England on the 31st leading a session on how to apply into the National Community Energy Fund. There's £10 million available to do feasibility studies on these types of projects. That money needs to be spent in 2 years, so do connect in, and yeah, just stay in touch. And thanks for all joining the debate. It's great to see so many of you here. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll end this call now, and thanks so much for joining. I'm glad to see that people are leaving with heads buzzing with ideas for opportunities ahead. I look forward to seeing your projects and you sharing them on here. Thanks. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.